Hey everyone, this is Michael again, and welcome to my review of Night 2 of WrestleMania 37. And of course, this was from Raymond James Stadium in Tampa Bay, out in Florida. And I didn't catch Night 2 live last night. I watched it earlier this morning. I finished watching it about an hour ago. And I gotta say, Night 2 of WrestleMania, it wasn't that great. Night 2 felt rushed and just underwhelming after coming off of a decent Night 1 of WrestleMania. The matches outside of the main event, which was the triple threat match for the Universal Championship with Roman Reigns, Daniel Bryan, and Edge, outside of that match, everything else on this show on Night 2 did not feel WrestleMania worthy. It just didn't have that feel of WrestleMania. The main event of Night 2, the triple threat, it actually felt WrestleMania worthy. But Night 2 was disappointing, and like I said, it felt rushed, and it just didn't seem to capture the decency that Night 1 of the show was. I mean, when you look at the card, Night 1 of the card looked just very meh on paper. But look at what WWE did. They delivered a decent show for Night 1. And Night 2, it looked like the better card on paper. And in my mind, I was like, oh yeah, Night 2 could be better than Night 1. Look how it turned out. They rushed it. WWE rushed Night 2, and it just came off disappointing after the decent show that we got with Night 1. So, overall, Night 2 of WrestleMania just was disappointing. But let's jump right into the review. So Night 2 of WrestleMania opened up last night with Ashlyn Kraft. Mike Rome ended up introducing her. She is a country singer. Haven't heard any of her songs. And she ended up performing America the Beautiful, which was a good performance from her. And of course, we had the aircrafts fly over the stadium after her performance. We had fireworks going off above Raymond James Stadium. And pretty much that was that. The show ended up opening. We had fireworks going off and pyro. And then Mike Rome ended up welcoming back the co-hosts for WrestleMania, Titus O'Neil and Hulk Hogan. Titus and Hogan ended up coming out, and they were dressed as pirates. So they're just doing some little comedy there. Hogan ends up joking about it being hot in the pirate outfits. And they end up welcoming us to WrestleMania Sunday. Hogan ended up saying that last night was unbelievable. And this will be no different. And what I meant when I said Hogan ended up saying last night was unbelievable and this will be no different, that was Saturday night that Hogan was saying about, because you guys are seeing this, it's Monday. And you guys are going to be seeing this video, of course, and the Monday Night Raw review later on tonight, which is the Raw after WrestleMania, which is one of the biggest Monday Night Raws every year. And WWE has not even mentioned anything for Monday Night Raw tonight. Nothing has been announced so far as I'm doing this video. It's after 4 o'clock. So we might get an NXT call-up, possibly, but as of now, they have announced nothing for Monday Night Raw tonight. So night 2 of WrestleMania opened up with Randy Orton versus The Fiend, Bray Wyatt. Orton ended up coming out first. He walked the stage. He was shown wearing white and red gear. He got into the ring. He started doing his pose. And we had pyro and fireworks going off. And Michael Cole ended up sending us to a video package of Orton's feud with Bray Wyatt. And, after we got that that video package, we saw Let Me In ended up appearing in the sky in red letters. And apparently, they were using drones for that, which I hope WWE uses that for future WrestleManias. I think that's really cool of them having drones and we see the letters in the sky. So I hope they keep doing that because I think that's very cool looking. So we had the Firefly Funhouse music end up playing. Alexa Bliss made her way out. She was skipping and jumping down the ramp while Orton was looking on from the ring. Alexa Bliss was shown all smiles. She was laughing. And then we see this huge version of her Jack-in-the-Box at ringside. So Alexa Bliss started turning the large handle of the Jack-in-the-Box that was set up at ringside, the huge Jack-in-the-Box. We heard the, Pop Goes the Weasel play. And then WWE decides to bring back the thing that we all hated when The Fiend, Bray Wyatt, wrestled in the ring. Yes, the Virtual Boy Red Lightning came back for the match. Why? Using the red lights does not do anything for The Fiend. The red lights, it's unbearable when you watch it on TV. It strains the fans' eyes. It hurts them. I don't know why they had to bring it back. Even Bray Wyatt stated that he didn't like the red lights. So why did WWE end up bringing the red lights back when everybody doesn't like it? I don't get it. WWE does this stupid shit sometimes. I'm like, if the red lights, if people are complaining about the red lights and you have Bray Wyatt go on and say he doesn't like the red lights and you take him away only for you to bring it back from what we saw last night, why did you do it? I don't get it. So we had Alexa Bliss. She ended up turning the handle. She kept turning the handle. The Fiend ended up rising out of the Jack-in-the-Box, staring Randy Orton down. We had the Fiend's music ended up playing, and he ended up, he ended up on top of the Jack-in-the-Box, and he shut the lid. And to me, in my opinion, Bray Wyatt's entrance was the only good thing that I liked about this match. Everything else was just mediocre. This was a mediocre match, in my opinion. So after the Fiend, got up on the Jack-in-the-Box and shut the lid, the Fiend ended up leaping from the top of the Jack-in-the-Box into the ring, delivered a flying clothesline on Randy Orton, and that's when the bell rang. The Fiend ended up going to work on Randy Orton. And another thing that I liked here was Bray Wyatt ended up paying tribute to Brody Lee, where he was going, yeah, which I thought that was pretty cool. Him doing a tribute to Brody Lee. So we had the red lights, still covering Raymond James Stadium, still covering the ring. Bray Wyatt ended up waiting for Orton to get back up. And Orton ended up slowly getting up, but ended up sliding out to the floor. The Fiend ended up following, but Orton ended up decking the Fiend, ended up slamming him on top of the announce table. The Fiend ended up popping back up and then applied the mandible claw to Randy Orton. So the hold was broken by Randy Orton, and Orton ended up delivering a draping DDT. The Fiend ended up coming right back up, and him and Orton ended up going at it. We had Orton ended up nailing another draping DDT to the Fiend, but the Fiend didn't come right back up. Orton started stomping away, but the Fiend was still getting up. Orton was delivering rights to the Fiend's head. So the Fiend ended up charging, but Orton ended up taking him out. Orton then ended up charging, but the Fiend ended up clotheslining him. And then at the end of the match, you had the Fiend end up getting up. He ended up blocking the RKO. He ended up applying the mandible claw to Randy Orton. Orton ended up going down to his knees. Fiend ended up turning Randy Orton over and kissed his forehead. And then we saw flames rise up from the ring post. And Alexa Bliss was shown sitting on top of the Jack-in-the-Box. And she was wearing a crown. And she had black ooze, like black blood, pouring all over her face. And it was really crazy, seeing that. I'm like, it looked like Alexa Bliss ended up falling into a mud puddle, I guess you could say, with the ooze just pouring all over her face. So Orton ended up coming from behind, and Orton ended up delivering the RKO to the Fiend, and went for the cover. And there you go. Randy Orton ended up winning the match. And once again, Bray Wyatt is buried. So post-match, the red lights end up going away, thank God. And Alexa Bliss was still sitting on top of the Jack-in-the-Box with the black ooze, the black liquid, covering her head and face. It was all coming down her arms. And Alexa Bliss was still staring at Bray Wyatt. So the lights end up going down inside Raymond James Stadium. It was all black. And then when the lights came back up, the Fiend, Bray Wyatt, was not in the ring anymore. And the Jack-in-the-Box was gone. So that was that. But looks like Alexa Bliss ended up using Bray Wyatt here, after what we saw. So I could tell that this is not going to be the last of Orton and the Fiend. I think WWE is going to prolong this, because I'm like, I hope after their WrestleMania match that we saw right here, this was going to be the end of their feud. I could definitely tell that WWE is going to prolong their feud. Watch. They're definitely going to do it. So, overall, this was just a mediocre match. The only thing that was good about this match was Bray Wyatt's entrance. And that was that. So then we saw Titus O'Neil and Hulk Hogan were in the back. They were with Eric Bischoff. They were talking about Sasha Banks and Bianca Belair, which was the main event of night one. Bayley ended up coming by. Bayley ended up interrupting them. She ends up annoying Titus and Hogan and Eric Bischoff. So Bayley ended up offering to be on Eric Bischoff's podcast, or she will have Eric Bischoff on her Ding Dong Hello talk show. So they end up walking off, and they left Bayley hanging once again. So that was that. At least, like I said in my night one review, at least WWE had Bayley on night 1 and night 2 of WrestleMania, which, in my opinion, she should have been one of the hosts for WrestleMania. Because there were people that were saying, "Oh, why don't they have Bayley host WrestleMania? She's not on the WrestleMania card. She doesn't have a match. So why don't she host WrestleMania?" But it would have been cool to see Bayley, host WrestleMania. So WWE is not doing anything with Bayley. She's been off TV for weeks before WrestleMania, way before WrestleMania. And then we went from a mediocre match with Randy Orton and the Fiend Bray Wyatt, a match that shouldn't have even opened up night 2 of WrestleMania. I forgot to mention that. So we went from that to another match that nobody even cared for. 2 matches that opened up WrestleMania. The Randy Orton versus the Fiend Bray Wyatt, and this match, which was the Women's Tag Team Championship match, Natalya and Tamina versus Nia Jax and Shayna Baszler. I had to say that this was better than the Tag Team Turmoil match, in my opinion, but still, just a very meh match. Just, these 2 matches open up night 2 of WrestleMania. These 2 matches did not feel WrestleMania worthy. These 2 matches did not feel that it was WrestleMania. So we had Tamina and Natalya come out first, and then Nia Jax and Shayna Baszler. We had Natalya and Shayna Baszler start off the match. They were trading shots. Baszler ended up taking out Natalya with a shoulder, and Natalya and Baszler end up running the ropes. Baszler ended up blocking a hip toss from Natalya. Natalya ended up going for the sharpshooter early on Baszler, but Baszler ended up getting to the bottom rope. Nia Jax ended up coming in. She ended up staring Natalya down, mocking her. Jax and Natalya end up locking up. Natalya got shoved from Nia Jax. And Nia Jax ended up wanting Tamina to come in. So we had the crowd end up popping as Tamina ended up coming in. So Tamina and Nia Jax were facing off. Nia Jax and Tamina were delivering headbutts to each other. Tamina then ended up countering a slam from Nia Jax. Tamina was delivering more strikes to Nia Jax. Natalya came in. Her and Tamina ended up double teaming on Nia Jax. Nia Jax was going to hit a double clothesline to take down Natalya and Tamina, but Natalya and Tamina end up delivering a back body drop to Nia Jax. Baszler ended up coming back in, and Tamina and Natalya end up double teaming on her. They end up slamming Shayna Baszler on top of Nia Jax. Natalya ended up going for the sharpshooter, but Shayna Baszler ended up countering it and rolled Natalya up for a 2 count. Natalya then delivered a German suplex to Shayna Baszler, and Tamina ended up delivering a super kick to Shayna Baszler, and Shayna Baszler was then unloading with kicks to Natalya, ended up leveling her with a knee to the jaw. So we had Tamina end up trying to go for a slam because Nia Jax and Tamina were out on the floor. They were fighting on the floor. Tamina ended up trying to go for a slam, but Nia Jax ended up countering it and slammed Tamina on the floor. Baszler ended up delivering another knee to Natalya in the ring, went for the cover, which Natalya ended up kicking out at 2. So we had Tamina end up hitting a Samoan drop to Nia Jax for a 2 count, and fans couldn't believe that. So Tamina ended up going to the top. She ended up delivering the Superfly Splash, and Nia Jax ended up moving out of the way. So Natalya ended up coming in, and we had Nia Jax end up grabbing Natalya as Shayna Baszler ended up tagging herself in. Natalya ended up delivering a basement drop kick and a sharpshooter attempt to Nia Jax, and she didn't realize that Shayna Baszler is the legal one here. So Natalya ended up rolling Nia Jax over. She ended up getting the sharpshooter. Shayna Baszler then ran in and applied the careful clutch to Natalya, and she ended up bringing her to the mat out of the sharpshooter. So Natalya was fading, and the referee ended up calling for the match. So there you go. Nia Jax and Shayna Baszler ended up winning the match. Predictable. Knew that Nia Jax and Shayna Baszler were going to win it. It just should have been the Riot Squad facing Nia Jax and Shayna Baszler for the women's tag team titles. The Riot Squad are much better opponents for Nia Jax and Shayna Baszler. When I saw Natalya and Tamina win at night one, the tag team turmoil match, I'm like, all right, Nia Jax and Shayna Baszler are retaining the titles. Man, what a very meh match. And then we had Sami Zayn versus Kevin Owens. And we had JBL be the guest commentator for the match. He was joined by Michael Cole and Corey Graves. Sami Zayn ended up coming out first, and he was shown fired up. And we had the fans singing along to his music, which that was awesome to hear. So Sami Zayn ended up getting on the mic, and he ended up calling for everyone to give a very warm WrestleMania reception to his special guest of honor. So fans were booing. They were booing for Logan Paul. And Sami ended up telling them to show some respect. He ended up saying that this is his only ally in making this documentary, to show the conspiracies against him. So he then introduced Logan Paul. Logan Paul got booed out of Raymond James Stadium. So Logan Paul came into the ring. He offered his hand for Sami Zayn to shake it, but Sami Zayn ended up hugging him instead. Sami Zayn then raised Logan Paul's arm. He got booed. Logan Paul, of course, got booed from the crowd. So then out came Kevin Owens. Kevin Owens came out to a huge pop from the crowd. And Kevin Owens looked like he was fired up to see the crowd again. So Sami Zayn and Kevin Owens ended up having some words. And the bell ended up ringing. Sami ended up charging first, but Kevin Owens ended up immediately catching Sami Zayn and delivered the pop-up powerbomb. Sami Zayn ended up rolling out to the floor. And Logan Paul was sitting at the commentary table, but he wasn't on commentary here. He was just watching the match. So Kevin Owens ended up following up. He goes for a powerbomb to Sami Zayn on the edge of the apron, but Sami Zayn ended up fighting free. Kevin Owens ended up following into the ring, started chopping Sami Zayn around. And Kevin Owens was just dominating over Sami Zayn. Owens ended up clotheslining Sami Zayn into the corner. And we had Kevin Owens then followed it up with a cannonball. Owens went to the top turnbuckle, but Sami Zayn ended up crawling to the apron to take a breather. Kevin Owens ended up charging in, but he ran into a big boot from Sami Zayn. Sami Zayn ended up going for a suplex on the apron, but Kevin Owens ended up fighting him off. And then we had Sami Zayn dropping Kevin Owens on the edge of the apron. He delivered a brainbuster to Kevin Owens on the apron, which looked brutal. Kevin Owens then ended up hitting the floor, and he landed hard. Kevin Owens made it back into the ring because the referee was counting to 8. So Kevin Owens ended up making it back into the ring. Sami Zayn was just delivered some strikes to Kevin Owens. Sami Zayn ended up kicking Kevin Owens, and he ended up mounting Owens from behind with strikes. We had Kevin Owens end up fighting back, and Sami ended up nailing a Michinoku driver. Went for the cover, which Owens ended up kicking out too. And we had Michael Cole on commentary, he called the Michinoku driver the Blue Thunder Bomb. And Corey Graves ended up correcting him. I'm like, Michael Cole, that's a Michinoku driver, not a Blue Thunder Bomb. Get your moves straight. So Corey Graves was joking on commentary after he corrected Michael Cole because he was going to save Michael Cole from the internet. You know how, people making memes about, online if somebody botches. So Sami Zayn ended up taking Kevin Owens to the top for a superplex, but Kevin Owens ended up fighting back. So Owens and Sami Zayn were trading strikes. Kevin Owens ended up headbutting Sami Zayn to the mat. Kevin Owens ended up following up with a frog splash and went for the cover, which Sami Zayn ended up kicking out. Sami then avoided a pop-up powerbomb, and Kevin Owens ended up hitting a neck breaker over his knee, but Sami Zayn ended up kicking out of that. So it was just back and forth between Owens and Sami Zayn. So at the end of the match, we had Kevin Owens ended up winning, where Owens ended up dropping Sami Zayn by delivering the stunner. So Kevin Owens ended up winning the match. Overall, this was a good match. This was a entertaining match. Sami Zayn and Kevin Owens, from the other matches that they had, in previous years, every time we see Kevin Owens and Sami Zayn in the ring together, that they're going to pull off a good match. And, this definitely was a good match between the both of them. So post-match, Logan Paul was looking disappointed at ringside. We had Owens end up, playing the crowd from the corner. Sami Zayn was trying to recover. Logan Paul then came into the ring to check on Sami Zayn. And Logan Paul ended up approaching Kevin Owens and offered his hand for Kevin Owens to shake. And Sami Zayn was furious at that. And Sami Zayn was ranting to Logan Paul about being his guest of honor. Logan Paul then shoved Sami Zayn to the mat, which Logan Paul got booed from the crowd. So Sami Zayn was limping away from the ring. Logan Paul then grabbed Kevin Owens' arm and raised it. And Kevin Owens was looking very annoyed at that. So Logan Paul ended up applauding Kevin Owens. And Kevin Owens ended up looking around. He was smiling. And Kevin Owens then dropped Logan Paul with a stunner. Logan Paul flopped like a fish, selling the stunner. And then Kevin Owens' music ended up hitting again. He was celebrating with the crowd. We saw Kevin Owens end up, greeting his family who were sitting at ringside. So we saw a referee and Jamie Noble. They were helping Logan Paul out of the ring. And that was that. But overall, very good match between Sami Zayn and Kevin Owens. Like I said, every time you see Sami Zayn and Kevin Owens have a match, it's going to be good. That's why, us fans always cheer Fight Forever. With Sami Zayn and Kevin Owens. They're very good friends outside of the ring. And then we saw Matt Riddle. Matt Riddle was riding his scooter backstage, and he saw the Great Khali and Ranjit Singh. Great Khali just went into the Hall of Fame this year. So Matt Riddle was like, "Oh, congrats on going into the WWE Hall of Fame. Can I see your Hall of Fame ring?" So Khali ended up showing Matt Riddle his Hall of Fame ring. And then Matt Riddle was like, "Oh yeah, your hands are huge. You should open a store for huge things. Sell huge shoes, huge clothes, and maybe huge scooters." So then Rob Van Dam, RVD, another superstar who went into the WWE Hall of Fame this year, he ended up walking up to them, and RVD end up giving Matt Riddle some of his branded rolling papers. So he was like, "Thanks, bro." And then they end up taking in the moment, and RVD was doing his Rob Van Dam, which Matt Riddle ended up doing, and Great Khali. And Great Khali did not say anything while Matt Riddle was mentioning, "Oh yeah, you should open up a store for big things." Great Khali didn't even say a thing. Like in his mind, he was like, "Is this guy serious?" So, but that was that. And then we had Sheamus versus Matt Riddle for the United States Championship. This was a decent match here. We had Sheamus end up coming out first, and then Matt Riddle came out riding a scooter. He ended up coming into the ring, and he had pyro go off as he kicked it he kicked off his flip flops. And when he kicked off his flip flops, I'm like, what a stupid image that was shown where birds were flying, where these CGI like birds were flying. I'm like, really, did they need to do that? It just looks so corny. So the match ended up getting on the way. Sheamus took control of the match. He ended up leveling Matt Riddle with a shoulder. Sheamus ended up grounding Matt Riddle by his arm, bending Matt Riddle's hand back. Riddle then turned it around in the corner, started unloading on strikes to Sheamus. Sheamus ended up coming back and ended up dropping Matt Riddle. Riddle then countered a slam from Sheamus and applied a sleeper on Sheamus in the middle of the ring. Sheamus then ended up ramming Matt Riddle back into the corner and started delivering some back elbows in the corner. Riddle ended up leaping at Sheamus, and Sheamus ended up turning it into a tilt-a-whirl slam, which Sheamus went for the cover, and Matt Riddle kicked out at 2. Sheamus then kept control of the match and delivered the Irish Curse backbreaker to Matt Riddle. They were trading strikes. Matt Riddle ended up fighting Sheamus into the corner, and Sheamus ended up kicking his way out of the corner, and Matt Riddle ended up using the ropes to apply an armbar. Sheamus then ended up beating on Matt Riddle with the 10 beats of the Bodran and a suplex for a 2 count. So at the end of the match, we had Sheamus end up leveling Matt Riddle with the Brogue Kick, and Sheamus went for the cover, and Sheamus ended up winning the match, winning the United States Championship. Post-match, Matt Riddle ended up sitting up. His mouth was shown bleeding, and Sheamus ended up stopping. He ended up looking down at Matt Riddle. Sheamus ended up making his way out, and he raised the United States Championship in the air. But overall, this was a good match from Sheamus and Matt Riddle. It was enjoyable. And Sheamus, of course, is the new United States champion. And then we had Apollo Crews versus Big E in a Nigerian drum fight for the Intercontinental Championship. And we had a performance from Wally performing Big E's theme, Feel the Power, which was a pretty decent performance. And we had Big E come out. Fans popped for Big E. And then out came Apollo Crews. Apollo Crews came out. He was carrying his large spear. And around the ring, we saw drums around, like these large green drums. There was also kendo sticks lying around. And there was a brass gong that was also put out there. So we had Apollo Crews and Big E in the ring. The bell ended up ringing. Both Apollo Crews and Big E went out of the ring. And both of them ended up grabbing kendo sticks. They came back in, and then they started having a kendo stick fight. They were just swinging back and forth. So they were just unloading on each other with kendo stick shots. They were brawling around ringside. Big E ended up launching Apollo Crews into one of the large drums that were out at ringside. Apollo Crews then blocked the shot with the gong that dropped Big E. Apollo Crews then ended up delivering some more kendo stick shots to Big E. Apollo Crews then kept control of the match. Big E ended up hitting a huge spear from the apron out to the floor on Apollo Crews, which looked awesome. That was an amazing spear that Big E ended up delivering Apollo Crews all the way out to the floor through the apron. And then Big E ended up bringing Apollo Crews back in, went for the cover. Apollo Crews kicked out at 2. And Big E ended up placing half of the ring steps at ringside. He ended up going to slam Apollo Crews from the apron down to the steps. But Apollo Crews ended up countering, and he ended up driving Big E into the edge of the apron. So Apollo Crews then ended up placing Big E on the ring steps. He carried the other part of the ring steps to the apron. He ended up going to slam the ring steps down onto Big E, but Big E moved out of the way. So they ended up coming back onto the apron. Apollo Crews then leveled Big E with a kick to the face. Apollo Crews then ended up charging on the apron. Big E ended up grabbing him, and Big E then drived Apollo Crews down to the ring steps with a Uranagi, and you could tell Apollo Crews was really in pain after Big E ended up delivering that Uranagi to him down onto the ring steps. So then I was like, oh, how is Apollo Crews standing from that Uranagi? I mean, he hit those ring steps. He hit that ring step hard. So Big E then ended up sliding the table into the ring. Of course, this was Tampa Bay is Big E's hometown, so the fans were popping for him. He then brought Apollo Crews back into the ring. He was looking to put Apollo Crews through the table, but Apollo Crews delivered the enziguri to Big E. Apollo Crews ended up taking the kendo stick again, started delivering shots to Big E. Apollo Crews then ended up placing Big E on top of the table. He climbed up to the top, and Apollo Crews went for the fork splash. Big E moved out of the way, and Apollo Crews then went through the table. Big E ended up scooping Apollo Crews up with the big ending. He went for the cover, but then we saw Dabba-Kato. Yes, Dabba-Kato. You all might remember him. He was in Raw Underground, or as I said last year, Raw Failure Ground, which I want to forget that. I want to forget Raw Underground or Raw Failure Ground even existed. But you all probably remember him from that. So Dabba-Kato came into the ring. They didn't even end up mentioning his name, but it was Dabba-Kato. He came into the ring. He attacked Big E. And Dabba-Kato ended up dragging Apollo Crews on top of Big E. And because of that, Apollo Crews ended up winning the match. Apollo Crews is the new Intercontinental Champion. So post-match, we had Dabba-Kato end up helping Apollo Crews up. He raised the Intercontinental Championship. Apollo Crews was posing in the corner. We had pyro going off at Raymond James Stadium. And we heard Apollo Crews say, "This is for Nigeria." And that was that. But overall, this was an okay match for what it was. It should have went on longer. But it was okay. It was an okay match. And then we had the 2021 Hall of Fame inductees come out. Greg Hamilton ended up introducing them on the stage. So we had that. And then we went to Rhea Ripley. versus Asuka for the Raw Women's Championship. And we had a performance from Ash Costello. I think that's how you pronounce her name. She is introduced with her band. She was performing Brutality, which is Rhea Ripley's entrance theme. And the performance was just meh, in my opinion. It was terrible. So then Rhea Ripley made her way out. And then out came Asuka. Asuka ended up coming to the ring, started posing in the corner. We had more pyro go off around the stadium. So we had the match start off, and the match was just okay, in my opinion. So the bell ended up ringing. Rhea Ripley and Asuka were having words for each other. They end up sizing each other up. Rhea Ripley ended up charging, but Asuka ended up drop kicking her. And Rhea Ripley was still standing. Rhea Ripley and Asuka were trading strikes. Asuka was kicking her. Asuka rolled Rhea Ripley up for a 2 count. Asuka came back and delivered a backslide and drop kick to send Rhea Ripley into the corner. Asuka then ended up missing a hip attack in the corner. Rhea Ripley then ran to a boot in the corner from Asuka. Rhea Ripley ended up chopping Asuka down the corner and started charging, but Asuka ended up sending her face first into the turnbuckles and then ended up kicking her. And then at the end of the match, we had Rhea Ripley end up winning the match. Asuka ended up kicking Rhea Ripley, tried to go for the running boot. Rhea Ripley ended up ducking it, ended up nailing the riptide in the middle of the ring. And there you go. Rhea Ripley wins the match and is the new Raw Women's Champion. I'm like, Rhea Ripley did nothing to achieve a Raw Women's Championship match. She comes up on Monday Night Raw. She's like, oh yeah, I want to challenge Asuka. I want to challenge you for a Raw Women's Championship. She did not have, she did not get, a match to prove that she could get a Raw Women's Championship match. They're just like, oh yeah, let's give Rhea Ripley a Raw Women's Championship match at WrestleMania and call it a day. When she comes up, she did nothing. So, there you go. Rhea Ripley comes up to Monday Night Raw, asks Asuka, tells Asuka she wants to challenge her for the Raw Women's Championship match at WrestleMania. We have the match, and Rhea Ripley wins the Raw Women's Championship by basically doing nothing. I mean, what has she done when coming up to Monday Night Raw, when she came up to Monday Night Raw? Nothing. So they're like, oh, there you go. Put the title on Rhea Ripley. Boy, now I could tell that Charlotte at home, she's rubbing her hands because we all know when Charlotte comes back, she's going to be the one to challenge Rhea Ripley for the Raw Women's Championship. And then Charlotte's going to defeat Rhea Ripley, and then the title's going to go back on Charlotte. Oh, joy. Oh, joy. Are you all looking forward to that? I am sure not. I know you all aren't. But imagine if Becky Lynch ends up coming back. So it could either be, Becky Lynch facing Rhea Ripley for the title if she comes back, if Becky Lynch returns. Or, we could have Becky Lynch and Rhea Ripley and Charlotte qualify and, have a triple threat for the title. And I know that's what's going to happen if Becky Lynch ends up returning. If not, Rhea Ripley's just keeping that title warm for Charlotte until Charlotte comes back. But that was the match. Overall, just an okay match. And then we had Hulk Hogan and Titus O'Neil back on the stage. They end up thanking the fans for both nights of WrestleMania. And Bayley ends up interrupting them. So Bayley ended up ranting about all she's had to deal with this weekend. She ended up asking where her pyro is. And we see pyro explode over the stadium. And she was ranting She was taking shots at Michael Cole and the Legends, the Hall of Famers. And then we had the Bella Twins come out, Nikki and Brie. So Bayley ended up knocking how they look, and Bayley was saying, oh, she's sorry to inform them that John Cena isn't here tonight. So Nikki ended up slapping the microphone from Bayley, and Brie ended up going, ding dong, goodbye. So the Bellas end up dropping Bayley. We had boos from the crowd. So the Bellas were standing tall with Hogan and Titus, and that was that. But you have here Bayley being embarrassed by the Bellas. Bayley ended up carrying the company on its back in the middle of this pandemic. And you just embarrass her in front of the Bella Twins. What the fuck? This whole segment was not needed. It was not fucking needed. How WWE treated Bayley in this segment is just disgraceful. After everything that this woman did to carry the company on her back through this pandemic when she was a SmackDown Women's Champion, and you treat her like this, and you leave her off of WrestleMania not having any match whatsoever, and she's just there, just, oh yeah, you could be on my talk show, not like that, but disgraceful to Bayley. And then we had the main event, Edge versus Daniel Bryan versus Roman Reigns, triple threat match for the Universal Championship. Now this match felt like it was WrestleMania. This felt like a WrestleMania worthy match here. This was just very good match this was. So we had Daniel Bryan end up coming out. He got a yes chant from the crowd. So then we had Edge come out. Edge got a huge pop from the crowd, and he had a big pyro display around Raymond James Stadium. So Edge and Bryan were both in the ring, and then out came Roman Reigns, the Tribal Chief, along with Jey Uso and Paul Heyman. And Jey Uso was shown hyped up, and all three of them were wearing red leads, I think that's how you pronounce the name, around their necks. So they stop on the ramp. Reigns ended up raising the Universal Championship. We had more pyro go off. So Reigns, of course, took his time entering the ring. And the match got underway. Reigns ended up dropping Daniel Bryan. Edge ended up rocking Roman from behind. Reigns then ended up fighting back, started unloading the corner on Edge. Daniel Bryan ended up coming in, started unloading on Reigns, delivering some uppercuts. Reigns then ended up tossing Daniel Bryan out to the floor. Jey Uso then ended up dropping Daniel Bryan with a super kick on the floor. And then he launched him into the ring steps. Reigns then tossed Edge out to the floor. Jey Uso then super kicked Edge in front of the commentary table. Reigns ended up intimidating the announced guys, Michael Cole and Corey Graves. And Daniel Bryan then ended up running the ropes, ended up nailing the suicide dive to Reigns into the table. Jey Uso then super kicked Daniel Bryan again. Edge was shown grabbing Jey Uso, and he launched Jey Uso into the ring steps. Edge then ended up decking Roman from behind, started beating him down from the apron to the barricade. So Edge was just manhandling Reigns and sent him into the ring post. Edge ended up taking apart the ring steps, and he ended up taking Jey Uso on top of the bottom half of the steps. He ended up dropping Jey Uso with a big DDT on the steps. And Reigns and Daniel Bryan were still down as Edge ended up slowly getting up. Daniel Bryan ended up rolling into the ring. The officials were escorting Jey Uso away. Edge ended up meeting Daniel Bryan in the ring. They started facing off. Reigns looked on from the floor at ringside. And we saw Edge and Daniel Bryan start unloading on each other. Daniel Bryan was delivering some yes kicks in the corner to Edge. Daniel Bryan ended up taking Edge to the top and hit a Hurricanrana, but Edge ended up reversing it and turned it into a roll-up. And Daniel Bryan kicked out at 2. There was a point where we had Reigns end up getting back on the apron. Edge ended up meeting Roman there. They started trading strikes. Reigns ended up going for a suplex out to the floor, but Edge ended up resisting that. Daniel Bryan then slid under and Reigns ended up hitting the apron. Daniel Bryan then went to the top and delivered a missile dropkick to Edge. Daniel Bryan was just working Edge over. Daniel Bryan ended up ducking Edge's clothesline and went for a suicide dive on Roman, but Roman ended up catching him on the floor and delivered a suplex. And we had Edge end up following, and Reigns end up hitting a big clothesline off the ropes. So Reigns was calling for a Superman punch, and Edge ended up countering it, ended up hitting a DDT. And we had Edge end up calling for the spear, and Roman ended up delivering the Superman punch. And we had in the ring, Daniel Bryan ended up applying the yes lock. He ended up pulling back on Roman. And Paul Heyman was looking worried. And Daniel Bryan was tightening the hold, tightening the yes lock on Roman. And at the end of the match, we had Roman end up winning. And Edge end up delivering a concerto to Daniel Bryan. Later on, we saw Edge had a crazy look on his face. He was getting chairs. He ended up decking Daniel Bryan with a chair at ringside. Edge ended up rolling Daniel Bryan back into the ring. He started unloading on Daniel Bryan and Roman with chair shots back and forth. Edge ended up dropping a chair. He ended up placing Daniel Bryan's head on top of one of the chairs. He grabbed another chair, placed it under Roman's head. Edge then ended up grabbing a third chair, and he delivered the concerto to Daniel Bryan. And he went to do it to Roman, but Jey Uso ended up attacking him, and Edge then ended up taking Jey Uso out with a spear. Edge started unloading on Jey with chair shots, and we had Roman end up delivering a spear to Edge. Reigns ended up putting Edge's head on a chair. Reigns then delivered the concerto to Edge, and Edge was passed out. Reigns ended up dragging Edge over. He ended up stacking Edge on top of Daniel Bryan. Reigns ended up pinning both Edge and Daniel Bryan at the same time. So because of that, Roman ended up winning, retaining the Universal Championship. Post-match, Paul Heyman ended up bringing in the Universal Championship. Edge and Daniel Bryan were slowly starting to move while they were down. Reigns then ended up standing tall with the Universal Championship. Jey Uso was on his feet as Roman ended up raising his arm by Paul Heyman. Paul Heyman ended up raising Jey Uso's arm. And we had Roman end up raising the title. Pyro and fireworks were erupting from Raymond James Stadium. And pretty much that was basically how night 2 of WrestleMania ended last night. But overall, this was a very good match. This was a WrestleMania-worthy match. This match actually felt like a WrestleMania match. And it was just entertaining. It was a very good triple threat match. But overall, night 2 of WrestleMania was disappointing. It was rushed. But night 1 was a whole lot better, in my opinion. But anyways, that's it for my review of Night 2 of WrestleMania. Thank you all for watching. Hope you all enjoyed this review. Definitely give the video a thumbs up, comment, subscribe, and I will see you later tonight for Monday Night Raw. It's the Raw after WrestleMania, so let's see if they will deliver tonight. So until then, see you all tonight.